Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ebokosia. I'm CEO of the GEM Project. I'm here to talk about how do we educate young people in a way that encourages them and empowers them, as well as match them to issues that they're passionate about and also they're affected by. And so when we think about this lens, I want to first talk to you a little bit about the GEM Project. The GEM Project's purpose is really to boost high school and college student engagement and educate them, but through two different distinct models. One through youth organizing, and the other through service learning initiatives which take on a social justice approach. In other words, critical service learning, which I'll talk about later. And I try to think about the process in which young people are educated and informed and are, especially young people who are vulnerable in different communities. Particularly with the GEM Project, we focus within communities that are low income, underserved, vulnerable young people, at-risk youth. I like to just call all young people champions and true ambassadors of their community. So there's three distinct ways in which we like to inform and educate and empower young people. But it first comes with the first thing that you have to do. You have to unlearn the idea of an uneven power dynamic between adults and children. We see this particularly in education between ages like K to 12, where the system is very oppressive, where there's only one person designated to be all-knowing, and it's usually an educator, usually an adult, and then youth are the most marginalized in that space, right? And so we first have to figure out, how do we level the playing field? Because through that lens, we are able to open the door in which all young people can see themselves as an active participant within their own education, which is very, very important. And it doesn't come without letting go of a few barriers for the caring adult within that learning space. You have to lead with vulnerability. And oftentimes it's really uneasy for adults in particular and educators in general to lead with vulnerability, because we're often taught, particularly in the United States educational system, that we have to be authoritative. We have to be in control. We cannot show that we are human, but we expect our young people to give their full selves into this space, which is very unfair. And so that comes with basically being honest, saying, I don't know about this, but I'm convinced that you and I, within this space, can learn alongside each other and discover each other. So you have to first, within our own framework, when it comes to youth organizing or service learning with a social justice approach, which I will unpack a little bit more later, you really have to be alongside the young child or the youth who's involved in that learning spaces together. You have to shape that agenda together. You have to discover together in that lens. The second thing, particularly when it comes to engaging youth, because that's most important, right? You can't just come into a space and expect to educate without engaging and getting young youth buy-in and investment. And it's often seen more of a cycle. I like to think of it, particularly if you want to look a little bit more in detail about this process, you can also look into the Funders Collaborative, which goes into detail. But the first process is a 5-step approach. The first one is known as youth services, which is most people today are trying to veer away from, right? Because it's the idea of seeing a young child as a problem, more as someone that has a deficit, right? That you're already thinking of prescriptives, figuring out how to diagnose that person. I know more about your situation than you. And that in itself provides this space of divide that allows that young person not to fully trust that that individual that's supposed to be that caring adult role model. The second, we go into youth development, which is a little bit more better, right? Youth development has to deal with the idea that that adults approach youth in a way that they meet them where they're at. They are able to grow these emerging skills and strengthen them in a way that allows them the space to thrive. But when you get into youth leadership, which is the third stage, you're able to really allow young people to take the helm, right? That they helm in certain positions and strengthen certain skills that they may not know necessarily to solve themselves within that space. And so now they're starting to be more engaged. They want to be more involved in the process. They see that you are evaluating them as a whole person, and they want to be more engaged with what they're learning. But then the fourth part is civic engagement. Civic engagement has to do with the betterment of the communities. Allowing youth to be able to walk into the space and see themselves, this is my neighborhood. I can influence my neighborhood. I can strengthen my youth voice. I can boost my social, political power in this space to influence policy, right? But the last stage, which is the stage that I'm most concerned with, is youth organizing. Now, stages 2 to 4 all took from each other. Stage 5, youth organizing, is sort of like that pyramid of actualization. You are here. We believe that youth organizing is a real strategy and tool that sees young people at the forefront of change by first identifying the issues in which affects their community, but giving them the space and resources and tools to be able to address those issues through collective action. And your role as an adult within that space is being seen as an ally, which is a very important role. You're assisting that learning process. You are helping them to identify these issues only so that they can see the barriers in which they come into your learning environment, whether it's an after-school program, whether it's a community center or some other flexible learning environment, that they can see those barriers and be informed and empowered because they have the knowledge, because they identify those issues. They participated in maybe community-engaged research or community-engaged activities, and they have real tangible tools to be empowered, right? And there's more that you can get in through this, but for the sake of time, I really want to go through the third component when it comes to really educating young people. So the third component is really introducing culturally responsive programming. We cannot be in spaces and be expected that our youth will be able to give their full selves to us in a way that is transparent, is a way that is vulnerable, in a way that is human, if we do not include them in the learning experience by what they're reading, by what they're doing, and also by who they're here, who's presenting in the space. If you know that you're not familiar, you don't connect with a young child, invite people in who will, right? Be an active participant so that child or that young person can see a full view of their community, which is hugely important. Now, the last model that I spoke about before addressing youth organizing was service learning initiatives, which take on a social justice approach. And I could sum this up very quickly. Oftentimes, we think about service learning, we think of community service, right? And just so that everybody has a good understanding of both, traditional service learning sees children and young people being a part of a community service component that addresses a community. It could be connected to their own, it may, but it also includes a learning component, whether that's through a workshop or classroom that allows them to connect and draw applications through what they're experiencing. And the idea with this is that this young person is going to develop leadership skills, which they do, but it does not delve deep. It does not address the barriers for them to really think critically and to understand the root causes of that issue. By incorporating traditional service learning in a framework that also addresses racial issues, oppression, systems, and other everyday barriers that that young child goes through every single day, you create more of a meaningful experience, and you also create a culture within a learning space and environment that provides equal buy-in and support, and also investment in that process. And so with that, I conclude the most important, what I believe through our own work with the GEM project has been the most influential and the most meaningful process in which we engage youth by involving them through the learning process. We don't teach at them, we teach alongside. And we are equal discoverers as they are in the process. Thank you.